Hello, everybody. Welcome to the session. Great to see you all coming in. Thanks a lot for joining. My name is Peter Vogel. I'm on the one side, I'm Professor of Family Business and Entrepreneurship at IND Business School in Lausanne, Switzerland, where I also head the Global Family Business Center, and I have the Debiopharm Chair for Family Philanthropy. And on the other side, I'm also an associate partner at the Cambridge Family Enterprise Group. So for me, it's a great privilege and an honor to run this session with you today. Effectively, we want to talk about family philanthropy today and how enterprising families can embark on their philanthropic journey or also improve and enhance their philanthropic activities. So I have a number of slides that I want to walk through. If you have any questions or comments in the meantime, just feel free to put them into the Q&A. I'll try to answer them kind of on the spot. If you have, we can also pick them up later. But in the meantime, I will also try to answer them live as we're going through the session. Okay, so let me share my slides. Primarily, I want to talk about the Family Philanthropy Navigator, which is our latest book that we published. It was released yesterday, so it's fresh off the press. We're incredibly excited about that. It's a book we've been working on for 2 years now, and we're incredibly thrilled. And thanks again, Dina, Courtney, and everybody from Cambridge for hosting this webinar today. So what we want to talk about first is philanthropy in the context of enterprising families and why it's important. And some of you, and especially if you've participated in prior Cambridge webinars or programs or sessions, of course, this framework here is familiar to you, and that John put together in 2013, the Family Enterprise System. And I think it's a very, very useful tool and framework to show the complexity and diversity of the family enterprise system, of course, ranging from the legacy family business to other types of businesses and organizations, investment vehicles like family offices, all the way through to philanthropic initiatives and impact investing initiatives. And that is exactly the lens also that we are looking at in the Debiopharm Chair for Family Philanthropy. What is the role of philanthropy in the context of an enterprising family? So not just philanthropy in and of itself. I think there's a lot of work going on in that space, but really looking at philanthropy in the wider space of the family enterprise system. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about a number of things, but I also want to, as much as it's possible, make this, interactive and so on. So, I want to start off with a simple question that I would like to ask you. And again, feel free. I hear the chat is not functional for you, so just use the Q&A if that's okay. And why do you think philanthropy is important for enterprising families? And again, of course, enterprising families have a massive impact on the world economy and society, and because they are the largest employers in the world and make up the majority of firms in the world. So the impact of families on the world is massive. But what is the impact of philanthropy on the family? Just write in the chat, in the Q&A. So Jeremy's writing, glue to keep the family together, training for the rising generation. Absolutely. I think this is spot on, Jeremy. A glue, so family unity and a training opportunity, an educational opportunity. What else? Anybody else? Just write. Martin, sense of society contribution among family members. Of course. So it's about the role and responsibility of families also vis-a-vis the society at large. Lydia, philanthropy becomes part of a family identity. Yes, so who are we? What characterizes us? What are our values? What are our shared vision, mission, values of the family as well? Jinan, opportunity to reflect on the legacy. Yes, absolutely. Spot on. I think this is again also important. Philanthropy oftentimes stems from the legacy of the family prior generations, and the heritage. So Abby is saying perpetuating family values. Absolutely. Again, this links to Jeremy's point on educational opportunity. So who are we? What do we stand for? What do we want to be perceived for? Georgiana, legacy. Yes, exactly. It's about legacy. Clara, greater sense of purpose. Yes. So what is our purpose? Individually and collectively as a family. Very important point. Then we have Richard, modeling behavior for younger generations. Absolutely. I think it's, again, showcasing who are we and who do we want to be and how do we want to be perceived. And of course, Eduardo, an opportunity to engage the next generation, so hands-on. And I think this is a very important point, because in the range of the family enterprise system, not everybody, and especially in the larger families, not everybody from the next gen will be interested in and be eligible for and see necessarily educated for a role in the business. And then, of course, there are many other opportunities to get engaged and contribute in a meaningful way. Absolutely. Sunny writing, giving unconditional love to each other. Yes, if done right. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we've seen philanthropy oftentimes leveraged in a very constructive way. However, we've also seen that families were hoping that in a fractured situation, philanthropy can be a mechanism to heal fractured relationships, and that typically doesn't exactly go down so well. However, if there is a stable family setup, then philanthropy can be incredibly bonding. A way to give back and maintain the family glue, Beatrice, absolutely, yes. So giving and giving back, yes. So and oftentimes families give to the communities where they're from or where they have business operations going on. Absolutely. Okay, so I think this is great. So keep typing if you want. Redistribution of wealth, yes. Another great point. So I think we could keep going on this question for a long, long time. That's wonderful. Internationally scattered families to center around geography and heritage. Yes, I think this is a great point also, Lydia. Kind of who are we and what is our origin? Wonderful. So I think you said it all. Now I don't have to say that much myself anymore. Yes, philanthropy on the one side can provide a relatively neutral space to meet and mingle for families outside of the legacy business, where it's maybe less competitive, especially for the next generation to come in. It's not so much about challenging the senior generation on doing the business differently and running different business models. It's a neutral territory, a little bit on the side. Second, it's about education. Many of you, Jeremy and many others, said it in the beginning. It's about education. It's about transferring values. It's about educating them around financial literacy and legacy and family heritage. It can be leveraged as a vehicle for inclusiveness. So in particular, in larger families where you have a good split between active and passive family members, or also in-laws that maybe by governance are not allowed to work operationally in the business or hold shares in the business, yet they are critical members of the family and oftentimes parents then of the next generation to come. So as a result, philanthropy is frequently leveraged as a vehicle to include passive family members or in-laws. It can provide an opportunity for generations to meet and to interact and to collaborate and to move from a parent-child relationship into kind of an on eye level interaction amongst adults. Yeah? And I think that is something that is not that trivial, parents, children, to go through that transition in an effective way. And lastly, it's about building up social and reputational capital. So who are we as a family? Who are we also as a business, if it's leveraged as corporate philanthropy? Who are we and how do we want to be perceived? Wonderful. So thanks a lot for all the comments on this. Now, I think it's quite exciting to see, where is philanthropy going? And we observe philanthropy as being incredibly transformative in these days. And, while historically maybe philanthropy was seen as something a little bit dusty, and families having their foundations, their legacy foundations for 50 years, for 100 years, we see that philanthropy, which in effect, coming from Greek, means love of humanity, which can be shown in many various forms and shapes, but it's going through quite an impressive modernization. And we're looking at this as kind of the three waves of philanthropy, where traditional giving was very much coined by religious structures and the major religions around the world effectively all have some aspects of philanthropy ingrained into their very DNA. And then kind of during the first industrial revolution, you saw many industrial families rise up to the opportunity and, generating quite remarkable wealth in a relatively short period of time. And they then said, giving back, one of you talked about giving back just before in the Q&A. It's leveraged as an opportunity to give back and to help the society around us in the communities and the cities and the countries. However, now we are observing this kind of third wave, and largely this third wave of philanthropy is driven by digitalization, modernization, giving us access and kind of a hyper awareness of what's going on in the world. And linked to that, we see an excitement in this space coming up, where historically people are a bit more reserved towards philanthropy, seeing it as something, let's say, old school. But I think philanthropy is becoming more hip and young again. What maybe 10, 20 years ago was maybe more the impact investing space. I think philanthropy is also getting a little bit of a brush up again. So we see a number of quite interesting trends in modern philanthropy. It's becoming more and more inclusive. And of course, digital technology is providing that opportunity through crowdfunding and crowd lending platforms, democratization of giving, matchmaking systems, where effectively it's no longer just the wealthy individuals and families that can give and make a difference. Everybody can contribute, even if it's just a small amount. We have, again, largely due to digital technology, we have a real-time global awareness. We have a hyper awareness of what's going on in the world. If there's a tsunami on the other side of the planet, we know it within minutes. If there's an earthquake, we know it within minutes. If there's a war, we know it. If there's this. So we have a real-time awareness of issues. And as a result, when there's a request for disaster relief or a fundraiser for something, you can act immediately. I'll give you a real example. So I'm part of a group called the Global Shapers Network from the World Economic Forum. And yesterday evening on Facebook, a friend of mine in the group posted a GoFundMe campaign of a fellow shaper who, went through some difficult times. He's from sub-Saharan Africa. Difficult times professionally, personally, has been an armed robbery, lost essentially all his everything. And, a friend of his launched this funding campaign saying, let's get him back on the feet and let's do a fundraiser. And within minutes, thousands of dollars came together and this was transferred to him like this and off we went. Unimaginable 40 years ago. But this is kind of the modernization where also the next generation is jumping in as agents of change and saying, let's take destiny into our hands and let's jump to action immediately. And that is where we also see a huge opportunity for enterprising families to not only include and leverage the skills and capabilities and the global mindset and the willingness to act as an agent of change of the next generation, but also to involve them early on in the process and in the family enterprise system. We see that there's a rise of a new breed of mega donors. And of course, things like the Giving Pledge is kind of a melting pot of these kind of individuals who largely due to technology also gathered and accumulated quite significant wealth in a short period of time. And they said, we want to give back. We want to give back quickly while we are alive. So this type of philanthropy is not so much about legacy philanthropy in the sense of I need to have my Peter Vogel Foundation that is still around in 200 years from now, like a statue. They say, I have wealth. there are issues in the problem I want in the world, and I want to fix them now. And that is also why we see a rise in spending down funds, and that it's less the perpetual type of foundations and endowments. It's more spending down instead of saying, let's just work with the proceeds. Let's spend all we have and want to give now, and let's fix the problem now. So again, impact-oriented, real-time. Now, this point here, rise of cohesive giving, I think is one of the most interesting points that I'm observing. And that is because it ties in with the family enterprise system. And we see that some families, not enough yet, but some families are starting to think in terms of what is our holistic collective impact as a family. And that spans across the organization, the business, the investment activities, and the philanthropic side. Do we have a shared vision, mission, strategy, and shared values across the board? Let's not do bad here and good here. Let's do good collectively. And I think this cohesive giving approach and this cohesive doing good mentality is a quite unique opportunity also from a governance point of view when trying to tie in and connect the dots in the family enterprise system. Impact-driven giving, I think, is not only a hot topic and a buzzword. I think it's pretty real. Many people still confuse impact investing and philanthropy. We'll talk about that in a minute. But more and more do we see impact-driven giving. So borrowing from best practices from the world of impact investing and KPI-driven doing business in the world of philanthropy. So instead of just handing out money and saying, okay, I did good, I feel good, I don't need to know what was done with this, there's more and more awareness of, well, if we actually check what's going on and we can be much more effective and efficient. We see a shift that people and philanthropists are less and less focused on regions or locations or cities, regions, villages that they're focusing on in their giving, and it's more on issues: climate change, carbon, deforestation, migration, education, gender inequality, whatever, but focusing on concrete issues. That's clearly on the rise because there, as soon as you have a clearly defined issue, you can also more clearly measure the KPIs and to see if you have an impact or not, positive impact. And lastly, we see that because many of the world's most pressing issues are so complex and so huge and so interconnected and so convoluted in nature that there is a multi-stakeholder approach that is needed, connecting governments and NGOs and businesses and philanthropists and entrepreneurs and social ventures and investors and family offices. So really working collectively as an entity on these mega issues. So these were effectively the reasons why we 3 years ago then started to say, well, in a space where there is already a lot of literature out there, we feel that there's still space to add one more book and to add one more toolkit and framework because the space of philanthropy is professionalizing, and that is quite clear. And effectively, we said we think we have an edge here, and we can provide something. So, the Family Philanthropy Navigator, this book here, we started effectively, and you don't need to read this. We started in 2017 in September when I joined IMD and took the chair for Family Philanthropy. The mission of the chair was help more families engage in philanthropy and help those that are active in philanthropy become better at it. So as a result of that, we said, let's put together a framework. And here you see a very early beta version of that framework that I put up on screen at a presentation of foundations. So for about a year, we were just playing around and testing with families, also at many FBN summits with many families. What do you think about a tool? Does this trigger interesting questions around the why, the what, the who, and the how of giving? Now, why, the motivation, what, the focus the causes you're supporting, the who, the people and organizations you work with, and the how being the governance. So after we got the confirmation from these kind of pilot phases that this is a tool that seems attractive for families, we entered the process of doing quite profound research with FBN and others, where we interviewed over 70 philanthropic families from around the world. And we started to realize that philanthropy is a vast space. It's an incredibly diverse space. There are as many ways of engaging in philanthropy as there are philanthropists. And then we said, okay, this is interesting. Let's write a book, but let's not just write a book to have another book that is on a bookshelf. Let's create something that is useful, practical, hands-on, and insightful for philanthropic families to use in real time. So we set out with our boundary conditions in the beginning, and we gathered a team. It was quite a journey. It was really a 2-3 year journey of writing this book with designers and editors. We locked ourselves up in a mountain chalet in Switzerland for a few days. We've taken a design-first approach. We ran workshops with major philanthropic families and philanthropists, testing our tools and making sure that our assumptions are valid. And then of course COVID came about, and then ultimately we then got the book out, and I mean yesterday we published the book, so that was quite a journey for us. And it's effectively a tool. You see it. Actually, let me go to this slide, because you see here, some of you might know the business model canvas by Alexander Osterwalder, and that effectively inspired us, me and my co-authors, Etienne and Margresata, to create something fun, insightful, practical for philanthropic families, where box by box, chapter by chapter, you go through a number of questions that are really driving you to take effective decisions. And we have the tool. It's full of case studies, interesting family cases with their best practices and learnings, number of activities, hands-on, how families can launch and start their philanthropic journey together. And the trade-offs, that's something quite intriguing, I find. It's something where through our interviews and conversations, we came to the realization that there's so many decisions you need to make along the way, and deciding on why do we want to be engaged in philanthropy, what is it that we want to do. And in each of these boxes, you can turn left or right. These are all kind of decision points. And we found at least 32 of those, which already shows you a little bit the complexity of this space, because effectively that says there are 2 to the power of 32 combinations of how you could do philanthropy. And effectively there is no one way to philanthropy, and there's your way to philanthropy. So we start with the purpose, talking about the motivation. Why do you want to give? Then looking at the focus. And again, to give you an example of these trade-offs, you could say, and that is where these conversations with families are so important. You could say, we want to focus on mental health care. Okay, we're passionate about mental health care. Why? Maybe somebody from the family was affected by it, was affected by dementia, for example. Okay, so we focus on mental health care. Now, that's still relatively broad. Yeah, so one of those trade-offs here would be depth versus breadth. Yeah, do we want to have mental health care holistically, or do we want to go deep into Alzheimer's, as an example? Or another one of those inflection points or trade-offs is, do we want to address the root cause or the effect? So if we stick to the example of mental health care, do we want to support research to find a cure or preventive medicine when it comes to dementia or Alzheimer's more specifically? Or do we want to work with Alzheimer's patients and their families and the caregivers? So again, root cause versus effect. And I think these are all decisions, while maybe, you all as a family, you might start off saying, yes, grandmother, grandfather was affected by Alzheimer's. We want to do something about it. You see, it can already go into a gazillion different directions. how you do it. And I think that is where it's important as families to have meaningful conversations around this. So the whole purpose needs to be shaped. Then the relationships, who from the family should be or could be involved in this? Is it me? Is it my immediate family? Is it the wider family? Is it also outside families that we partner up with? These are important decisions to take, also when it comes to governance. Then how do we interact with partners and professionals? Do we get professional board members in? Do we partner with other organizations and other families and other foundations? How do we want to build our ecosystem? On the organization side, how do we equip our philanthropic initiative with resources? And the resources are, most people associate philanthropy with giving money, but it's also about giving time, it's about giving talent, and it's about giving ties. So we talk about the 4 T's: treasures, time, talent, and ties. And of course, oftentimes it is about giving money, the treasures, but also leveraging your skills, capabilities, reputation, network to cascade and have an impact. And do these resources only come from the family, or also do we leverage other outside partners? The governance, how do we want to structure it? How formal or informal do we want to have it? How visible or not do we want it to be? Do we want to leverage existing governance mechanisms, the family council, the family office? How does it tie in with the business? Do we take proceeds from the organization to fund our philanthropic activities? Or is it private proceeds from the dividends from the family? So all of these questions are quite fundamental in the governance part. And then last but not least, the impact. Having some metrics and measurements, qualitative or quantitative in nature, to make sure that you know that you are on track. And then, because all of this is a journey, there is also a learning element. And we've put in place an assessment scheme where established philanthropists, because this is not only for novice aspiring philanthropists, this is also for established philanthropists, taking an assessment and saying, are there things we want to change? Do we want to change focus? Do we want to change how we engage with the family? Oftentimes, for example, it is one individual or a small subgroup of family members starting the philanthropic journey, and then over time looping in other family members and widening the scope. So these are all changes that then have implications on other boxes here. For example, if you widen the family, you should be adjusting the governance. Who is involved, who can be involved, who should be involved, in what forms of management or governance in the foundation, how does it interconnect with the different other governance bodies. Makes a huge difference if you think it through, if it's only 3 family members, or if it's a large family, if you have 50, 60, or 100 family members. Governance is a huge difference, and resources, etc. And so the learning is incredibly important. And don't forget to use the Q&A if you have questions. We can take questions also later, but if you have questions or also comments, you don't only have to ask a question. If you have something to comment or add, just type it in there. I will be monitoring it as I'm speaking. So when we go into this first box, the motivation box, we see that there's a huge variety of reasons why people give. There is no one reason. And fundamentally, we see kind of these 3 circles of why people give. And of course, oftentimes there is a reason for a cause, something that you're passionate about, or something you've seen in the world when you were traveling or watching the news, or something where you said, this is just not right. Or it's the grandmother or grandfather suffering from Alzheimer's. Either it's something very personal coming from your own experience, or it's something that you've witnessed, or you say, I think it's completely not okay with the climate change or deforestation or whatever. And I want to get active in this. So there's oftentimes a cause. But like we elaborated together before, oftentimes there's also this family element. Education, onboarding, unity, family cohesion, etc. So this family circle, especially for enterprising families in philanthropy, this circle is oftentimes very pronounced. Sometimes more implicit than explicit, and sometimes they also uncover this only once they've started. Oftentimes we see families kind of start here on the cause, And then over time, they start to realize that, ooh, it actually has some positive impact and effects on the family as well, or also on the business with reputation, etc. So there are multiple reasons, and it's important to be clear on why we want to do it. Then the causes, I mean, there are so many things you can do, and of course, it's important to focus. Because you cannot fix every issue in the world. And you know, on the top left, you see the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs by the United Nations, providing one source of inspiration for some of the things that need to be fixed in the world. But also in the book, we put together a more detailed, comprehensive list, also adding elements like arts and culture and music, religion, science, sports, which is not so much focused on in the United Nations list. But again, there are so many things you can do and support. And here comes the big challenge. Just last week, I ran a workshop with a family, a small family, 2 parents, 3 kids, and they said, we want to embark on a philanthropic journey together. I said, great, let's go. You know, we ran the workshop, we started brainstorming, typical post-it exercise. What are the causes you're passionate about and you care about? 5 people, 30 post-its. Yeah? And then you start trying to make logic out of it. And then you start to see patterns. Okay, maybe there's something around education. Okay, there's something around the rainforest. Okay, there's something around climate change. So then you start to see patterns and clusters. And then you cluster these, and then you say, within these clusters, can we be more specific? But this is a process. It's a learning process that families need to go through individually and collectively over time to make sure that the range of interests is also taken care of. And of course, and that where it ties in with the involvement of family. If you involve 50 family members from the get-go, and you go through this brainstorming exercise, you will have 200 different causes that you want to support. So yeah, you always need to be rather mindful also on the pragmatic side, how to make it happen. Then what we see, and what you see here is the traditional investment spectrum, going from on the right, the financial side, business-driven aspects, and on the other side, the pure charitable side. Okay, Lydia, I'll come back to your question in a second. I will keep it here. Let me go through this point, and then because on the next slide we will talk about partners. So we see the investment spectrum from traditional business to charity, and historical. In the second wave of philanthropy, we saw a lot of, we make money over here, and we give money over there. And there is almost no connection besides maybe the individual who started the company and started the foundation. And, let's say in old economic terms, you would say, the business of business is to do business and full stop. And I think by now we understand that this is not exactly anymore the way we look at business. There's a huge transformation going on into more purpose-driven business, leveraging business as a force for good, et cetera, and trying to find again this cohesive strategy. And on the left side of the spectrum, kind of the charity side and the impact investment side here, we see a blurring where, especially in this space, you say, okay, there's a revenue generating mechanism, and there can be social ventures or venture philanthropy, where more on the left side of that spectrum over here, you would have cause first and financial return second. Over here, you would then have more financial return first and cause second. But in the center, they mix. And I think traditional philanthropy is more and more inspired by impact-driven giving. Now, partners and how we spin our ecosystem of giving. We see more and more that philanthropy is becoming a we rather than a me. It's not so much about creating the Peter Vogel Foundation that is still around in 200 years from now. It's like my statue in the city center. But it's about how can we collectively, with the family and our outside partners and the business and so on, have an impact. And I think we are starting to see this collective approach, multi-stakeholder approach, and I think this is incredibly important. So let me go to your question, Lydia. So does the book advise on how to find the right partners? There are so many ways they can help, or people that can say they can help. Does the book advise on how to discern people who really care and or charge fees and so on? So how to find the right partners in your giving ecosystem? I think this is incredibly important. This is kind of this outer circle, yeah, networks, NGOs, admin teams, your friends, lawyers, the authorities, bankers, finding board members and other donors that support you. So I think this is incredibly important. And, like in any company, finding the right employees is really difficult. I think it's just as difficult, if not more difficult, to find the right partners. Yes, we go into that topic with a number of triggering questions. Again, it will not be the final recipe, but I think it's a get-go at this topic. But I think it's an incredibly important one, and we see many philanthropists who take off in the beginning. They create their ecosystem of giving in the beginning, and then they make adjustments. And that is where this learning box comes in, this assessment where you say, okay, we started, it's been 2 years now, let's reassess where we are, or it's been a year, let's reassess where we're standing. In a regular interval, going back and challenging the status quo and saying, remember in the beginning, we said we want to achieve this, we are achieving that. Are we on track or not? Are we doing something else or not? And are we using the right resources? Are we devoting enough or the right resources? Do we have the right partners? Do we have the right employees, et cetera, et cetera? So I think that is where this learning comes in, and I think nobody will get it right from the get-go. And this is just impossible, but it's a learning process. And if you embrace the learning mindset in the beginning, I think then you're off to a good start. So as I said in the beginning, philanthropy can be and should be, in our point of view, seen as an integral part of the family enterprise system, as a strategically integrated part, not as something loosely on the side, but really in the core of the family enterprise system. And we see that the most effective philanthropic families, they really treat it as an integral part, and we see a holistic governance approach and different touch points. And of course, tying it in with the three-circle model from John, and the family office space and existing governance mechanisms, there are many different ways how you can engage in philanthropy, and how many different ways how you can leverage existing governance mechanisms in philanthropy. And I think it's just incredibly important to connect these dots and to say, how are we going to leverage the family council? How are we going to leverage the shareholders? How are we going to leverage the employees in the organization? And how are we connecting the dots across these different governance bodies? So this was just a very quick kind of sneak preview. Now, before I stop and we can take a few questions, I just wanted to share something. So like I said, we published the book yesterday. It's literally fresh off the press. I just got this copy into my mailbox a few days ago myself, and it's super exciting. It's Christmas time. Yesterday was Giving Tuesday. We're starting the Advents period. We're starting the pre-Christmas time, which historically is one of the most important periods of the year when it comes to philanthropy. And quite frankly, it's also a time where, in the context of COVID, many people are suffering. And I just looked at some stats from the UN around their SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and how COVID has actually brought us back on a vast majority of these goals. So moving us further away of achieving these goals, with the exception of climate change, which is I think one of the only ones that has actually benefited, or also life below water and life on land, simply because less industry, less pollution, etc. But all the societal elements, all the things in terms of inequality, poverty, education, they've all suffered. So we said as authors that we would like to embark on our own philanthropic journey as well, and we would like to invite you to join us as well in this. So we as the authors, we decided to pledge all author revenues from the book between yesterday and Christmas to a foundation that is based in Lausanne called Mère Sophia, which is working with some of the most vulnerable people in the world. I mean, in the society, right? It's people that have dropped out of the out of the social welfare system. Now you can say Switzerland, you know, it's a wealthy country. Is there really poverty? It's different poverty. It's clear it's different type of poverty than if you compare it to developing countries. However, believe me, there are people in Switzerland that are definitely suffering quite hard. So we decided as authors, IMD is based in Lausanne. My co-authors organization is based around the corner as well. So we decided to support a cause there, Mère Sophia, and so we're donating all our author royalties until Christmas to the foundation, and then we'll do some volunteering work there, and so on. So with that, you know, I would like to invite all of you to, you know, also become ambassadors of this and help us spread the word. You know, writing a book is you know, it's a big task. But then when it's published, the real work starts, and that work is, you know, getting the journey going and spreading the word. And from that point of view, I think if you could help us and act as an ambassador and share the word about this, as I said, all the proceeds will go to the foundation. And you know, we've been approached by a number of families who said, you know, this year we can't run a lush Christmas party, or neither with the family or also with the board or the employees. So you know, we had families ordering 100, 200 copies of the book as a Christmas gift to the family, depending on the size of the family, of course, but also their business partners and philanthropic partners. So again, just as a source of inspiration. And again, this is not for me as a money-making thing. Anyway, this is not the J.K. Rowling kind of book where you can retire after publishing it, but it's about us making impact and contributing to the foundation ultimately.